How did this hippie traveler build a company from zero to now, earning at least $165 million off his windmill trailer and crane truck? We'll take Dale on a trip down his memory lane from his early childhood and find out how he started thinking green and living green.
So stay until the end for some incredible life lessons from a successful green entrepreneur. Let's dive in. All right, Dale, thanks for joining us today. It's great to have you. I really appreciate you taking some time to speak with us.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thank you both.
Yeah, we got Sean here along with Ronnie, and we're gonna dive into it and learn a little bit more about Dale and your journey to where you are today. You've had a lot of vast experiences over the years, and I know bits and pieces of them, and Ronnie knows bits and pieces, but we've got some more questions we're interested in finding out, and what makes you tick, and what has gone before now to make you tick. I'd love to jump in just kind of early days. Tell me a little bit about your childhood. You know, where did you grow up? What was your family doing? What were you like as a kid?
I grew up on the east coast of England, a place called Great Yarmouth. And as a kid, I was kind of like inventive, inquisitive, interested in science. I wanted to be an astronaut when I was in primary school, till the age of about 11. And then I realized I was born too soon. It was never going to happen. That was a big disappointment. You know, I had some kind of early sustainability concerns. I was a bit of I like to make things, invent things. I powered them with old batteries of the day, you know, rudimentary batteries that ran out very quickly. And it bothered me that you had to throw them away. They couldn't be recycled. And, you know, I had some early thoughts about fossil fuels and how much oil was being burned by cars and when it was going to run out. That would have been in the like early 70s.
Wow. Even as a child, you were thinking that way.
Yeah. And I was a biker as a teenager. Enjoyed that life, and eventually, a few years later, looking for a kind of different way to live, I dropped out and lived on the road for about 10 years, living in different vehicles, traveling around different countries, different parts of this country,
yeah.
And then eventually dropped back in what would be the early 90s to try and build a big windmill, which was the beginning of this whole Ecotricity journey.
Right. I just want to jump back a little bit more into your teenage years. I read somewhere that you'd left school at 15. I assume back in the day, people were still going to school longer than when they were 15 years old. But what made you leave school at that time? Was it too easy, too hard, just not interested? What was going through your life at that point?
Yeah, I hated it. Me at school, we didn't get on. And it wasn't that I couldn't do it because I could. And I had problems with rules. I had problems with petty rules. I had problems with authority. And it just reached, I guess, a kind of a negative cycle for me and the teachers. Mm-hmm. You know, but I got like, they used to be called O-levels. And I got like 8 or 9 of those before I left. And it was a year at which you could leave or you could stay on and do higher education. And I remember the teacher saying to me, "We don't want you back."
Oh, no.
And I said, "Don't worry, I ain't coming back."
Wow. What were your parents?
Really happy to leave. You know, it was like the happiest day of my life to leave school. It was a big deal for me.
Right. I can imagine. What were your parents doing? What were your parents entrepreneurial or environmental?
I think they were, not environmental. My dad was a lorry driver, and I don't know how old I was when he got his own lorry. So he drove for other people. And then at some point, maybe I was like young teenager, 12, 13, I'm not really sure. He got his own lorry. And then over a few years, he had like 2 or 3 lorries. And so I learned a lot from him about mechanical stuff. I used to blow my little motorbike up like all the time. And, you know, he'd come home from work and pull it apart for me, and I learned from him how to pull engines apart and how to put them back together again. And I carried that with me, really, that interest in mechanical stuff. Took it on the road. It became a really big asset on the road of building the vehicles that I lived in, swapping engines from petrol to diesel, all sorts of really creative stuff. And yeah, it would have been rooted in that for sure.
Dale, when you were growing up, did your family know that you were somewhat of a, let's say, a change leader, right? Where a rule breaker, but because you had a bigger idea of what the world could be, or were they just looking at you saying, okay, you're just getting into a lot of trouble? What was their thought process around you?
I think they just found me difficult. Um, I guess I was challenging. I was the kind of kid where, somebody told me I had to do something, I would say why. And I needed a why. I needed a good reason why. It wasn't enough, the response I normally got, which was because I said so. That's not enough, is it?
Right.
It has to be a good reason. And my mother, she wanted me to go on and do things that she would be considering great things, have a career as I don't know what, honestly, I don't, but she wanted me to have a career. She wanted me to go to university and all this kind of stuff. And I dropped out of school and I was the happiest kid on the planet, and I wasn't doing anything, but I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. So that was a source of friction between us. She was quite controlling, I would say, quite bossy. And, I'm the kind of person that just struggles to have authority imposed upon them. So we clashed, and I couldn't really leave fast enough. So I left.
Well, was that when you went vegan in your teenage years, or when exactly did you start to give up meat?
The day I left home, I
Wow.
never ate meat again because I was responsible for my own kind of food, and that was like a very clear, easy, obvious thing. It just happened. I never bought the stuff. I never really was comfortable with it, and had problems as a kid talking about it. I remember upsetting them by talking about it because it was like, they thought it was rude to talk about what it was I was eating. And I wanted to talk about it because it seemed to me, well, a little bit challenging. I thought it was a wrong thing to do. It was a little bit revolting. But to talk about which parts of an animal that was that I was chewing, they found highly offensive, which, today still amazes me. But I think that people that were brought up that way, accepting that meat and dairy are just normal things, I think over the years it's probably lessened to a degree, but I've always seen real offense taken by them to somebody that has a vegan outlook. It's like a challenge to their whole way of life, their whole belief system, and they take that badly. It's happened to me a number of times, but it happened first with my family.
Right. Did your parents get to see some of your success with Ecotricity? Are they
Yeah.
still around?
Yeah, they're still alive.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure that relationship has evolved many times over since your childhood.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Right on. And so, yeah, it talks a lot about, there's a lot of been published about you and your new wave traveler days, about 10 years or so. Over here in North America, new age traveler is not a common term. Tell us a little bit about kind of those 10 years. What were you doing? What does a day look like? What was your mission? What were you doing for those 10 years?
Well, it began just looking for another way to live. I was stuck in town, with the usual problems of somebody that didn't particularly want to have a job because I didn't want to get stuck doing something. But I realized that made me economically marginalized. Have it being on the dole or something. It's just not a sustainable place to be. And I'd been to a few summer festivals, out in the country, and I'd seen people that were living in vehicles and living a different way. And I thought that would be a really cool thing to do. So I got an old truck and hit the road. That was at the beginning. And so at the beginning, it was all about exploration. It was, I didn't know where I was going. I just drove looking, hoping to bump into somebody and some people. And so in the beginning, it was about exploring that, finding people, exploring that way of life. And really, it was about survival. I spent my first winter that year living outside of normal environments. Living without a house is really interesting in the winter.
Oh,
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then it evolved, over 10 years. By the end of 10 years, I had a windmill on my trailer, and I was powering myself with renewable energy. I'd built a whole series of trucks. I had one with a crane on the back. I was doing all kinds of different things, running a mobile phone service at a big festival called Glastonbury, for example. This is the early 90s when mobile phones first came out. And I don't know if you remember them, you guys.
big ones.
Yes, you remember them. Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So I had this like old pylon that I bought from a scrapyard, and I converted it, because pylon is normally slopey like this, and I converted it to be a straight up and down tower. I built it into sections so that I could carry it on my lorry and then assemble it across the ground and then pull it up. It was 60 feet tall.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I bought a windmill from America, actually, from a company called Whisper. It was I think it was a 1 kilowatt, two-bladed machine. I stuck that on the top, some train batteries on the bottom, and then 4 of these mobile phones. And I went to Glastonbury, built that, and just sold phone calls. And this was like 1992, maybe, something like that. Um,
Wow.
and that was great fun, and madly successful. I mean, everybody wanted to make a phone call. Everybody looked up and said, "I'm calling on a wind powered phone." Like it was some amazing technology, and they were like, "Can I get one at home?" I'm like, "It's a mobile phone." Yeah, so I was doing stuff like that by the end of it, and in between different things. I went abroad for probably about a year, lived in Europe, and I kind of lived in a whole range of different vehicles in a lot of different places with a lot of different people.
Would you call yourself then, even at that time, being known as simply unconventional? Because I know a lot of entrepreneurs. Obviously, we deal with a lot of entrepreneurs here at Plant Based Profits. But when someone says unconventional, it can be taken 2 ways, right? Whether you're unconventional in a bad way, unconventional in an innovative way. But would you describe yourself pretty much as unconventional?
I'm sure that I am. It's not one of my go-to labels, but I'm sure that I am. And to some people, I'm unconventional in a bad way, that's for sure. And to other people, I'm unconventional in an innovative way. And that's just about your outlook, isn't it? Because I bumped into all sorts of people in this journey, building Ecotricity and stuff, and had to kind of break an awful lot of status quos and taboos and stuff like that. So that's unconventional in a bad way to some people, but how else do you bring change? How else do you improve things?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I read that you in kind of 1991, you saw kind of the first windmill farms being built in Cornwall area. Was that kind of seeing some of those other windmill farms? Was that kind of the precipitous to get your light bulb moment going about Ecotricity and well, maybe not Ecotricity at that stage, but starting, I guess a bigger windmill project?
Yeah, this is how it worked. I was living on a hill outside Stroud. It's the place now where our first windmill is, still there 24 years later. I had a little windmill powering my trailer, so I was kind of in tune with where I was parked. So I knew it was a windy place, because that stuff when the wind powers your life. And and I went to see the big windmills in Cornwall. I was really impressed. I was aware of climate change. Making electricity in England or Britain was the biggest single source of climate change was from the way electricity was made, I should say, burning fossil fuels.
And it was mostly coal at that point, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, so I had those kind of in the background. I was familiar with wind in some ways, small wind, and I had this idea. It was a proper epiphany, because I just thought to myself, I could spend another 10 years living like this low impact lifestyle, or I could drop back in and I could try and build a big windmill on this hill and make a difference, make a bigger difference that way. It was a simple thought, that's what I chose to do. I found it really exciting, actually, and I just dived into the whole topic of wind energy. I didn't have a clue really what it was going to take, what was involved, and wind energy itself was an emerging industry. It wasn't an industry then. It was just coming out of academia. It was a lot of research papers around, a lot of stuff in R&D. So I was learning about something that wasn't just new to me; it was new to the world. It was new to itself,
right?
And that was kind of fascinating 5 years that it took to build that first windmill.
Wow, 5 years. What were the windmills in Cornwall at the time? Where were they supplying electricity? Because I understand Ecotricity is kind of one of the big first green energy companies, but who owned those, and where was that energy going?
So they were built by a farmer,
Okay.
Peter Edwards, and they were sold under some kind of government organized contract, like a PPA, and the power effectively, you know how it is with energy, there's a real and there's a kind of academic version of where it goes, but effectively it went into the local grid.
Okay.
And it powered local homes, but not in the hands of an independent energy company. That didn't exist at that time. It was at a time when our energy industry was state-owned.
Right.
I'm curious, Dale, when you came up with this idea of going bigger with windmills, and obviously when you saw the first one, it caught your interest because you're a rule breaker already, looking at it going, well, this is interesting. But as an entrepreneurial, or at least a person with an entrepreneurial mind, did you think to yourself, this could change the world, we could do this? Were you thinking big already, or were you thinking, there's just a better way, kind of like in the moment, just kind of thinking, why don't we do this? Or were you already thinking slightly ahead and looking at the future? What was your thought process?
Right at the beginning, it was build a big windmill on the hill I was living on. And it was a big job. I was a hippie traveler living in a caravan on a hill. I had no qualifications or money or training in this field of wind energy. And I was looking at a project I didn't know at the time, but ultimately I think it probably cost about £400,000, the capital cost of the project.
Wow.
Just to put a bit of context into that. And, it was a 40-meter windmill that I ended up building. So it was like a big ask already. But by the time I built it in December 1996, before that, by about a year, I could see it coming. I'd solved the last of the great hurdles, and did start to think about building more windmills because it seemed natural, to do more. And I went to see the local power company because they were still the monopoly energy providers at the time. And if you exported into the grid, you had to sell your power to them. And I went to see them to say, do you want to buy a new kind of electricity, the green kind? And they just laughed at the idea and offered me a rubbish price. But at the same time, I was aware that the energy industry was liberalizing. It was privatizing as well. So it was going from public to private hands. But at the same time, it was possible to start a new company and be an energy company. And so I left that meeting with the local monopoly that was publicly owned at the time, and just determined to start an energy company to cut out the middleman, because to build more windmills, I had to get a fair price for the power, and I couldn't get it that way. And that's how Ecotricity was born. That was actually 1995. So the year before I built the first windmill.
Wow. So timing obviously is very important in business. And, if you'd start that 5 years earlier, it was still a monopoly and that would not have been an option.
Yes, it wouldn't have been possible at all. Yeah,
wow.
I mean, that's perfectly correct.
Where did you get the funding? Obviously, you're living in a truck and you're going to go try to raise $400,000, 400,000 pounds for your first windmill. Who took the chance on you?
Well, it was a problem I left till later. I didn't try to tackle that at the beginning. I did chat to some local banks, and they just looked at me like I was from another planet. And so I left it. And I really took these problems as they presented themselves. When I dived into the world of wind energy, I discovered the first thing that I needed was a wind monitoring tower. I had to measure wind speed and direction at the hub height of my intended machine for 12 months, and then use that data to make a long-term prediction, because it was a key part of the business plan, the financial model. I didn't have the money to buy a tower, so I made one, and I put it up with my own crane and started measuring the wind.
Wow.
And it turned into a business, improbably, because a farmer in Swindon asked for one, and then Scottish Power, a big utility in Britain, got into the wind energy game and began to need quite a few. And And so that actually turned into a business, and it paid for the next steps of my project, which was to get planning permission, negotiate the grid, all that kind of stuff. And so by the time I came to being ready to need the money to build a windmill,
right.
I hadn't earned it all, but I bumped into a bank called Triodos, a Dutch bank, just moved to England, and they were willing to fund 80% if I had the other 20%, 60 grand or so. Yep. And I had the other 20% then because of, this master business. So that problem got solved at the very end of the 5 years.
Wow. Very serendipitous. Again, timing is so critical.
Yeah. And, I do think that it's kind of an important lesson I would take from that. If I looked at the 5 big challenges of building a windmill as a whole at the beginning, and the probability of being able to do that, I would have concluded that I couldn't. But I didn't do it that way. I just took them one at a time, chipped away at them, and then circumstances in the background changed, and actually, eventually, 5 years later, I built it. So.
That's a very key point there, that some people will look at a map, look at the destination and say, okay, can I make it? Can I not? What are my routes? And you just basically followed the line of the road. Whatever came up next, okay, we'll deal with that. We'll deal with that. And really didn't think too deep in terms of all of the steps needed to make something happen. You just almost let it flow.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. The road analogy is, but yeah, it's like, it's a lot like that. I just dealt with what I could and left the other stuff. Sometimes it was running in parallel, like the grid connection conversation took place over 2 or 3 years, and it was a real problem. But I kept on it, did the other stuff, and eventually the whole thing just came together. Yeah, and I do find that, I have conversations all of the time, let's say on social media, for example, about what's going to happen next in the world, about environment stuff. And it's a common mistake for people to look at what's possible today and say, yeah, but that can't be done, and not to see what's coming, because what's coming down the road is often going to enable something that can't be done today. And so I think that you've got to balance these factors when you're looking at trying to implement an idea. For example, you've got to be rooted in what's possible today, but you've got to see what's also going to be possible in a year or two's time and blend the two.
Right. Absolutely. In your early years, what were some of your first hires? Who were the people you were hiring first? What did it look like? Kind of the first, dozen or so people you had when you had to actually create an office and an actual business.
My neighbor was the first hire.
Oh,
so I ended up moving into a house probably around 93. I'm not really sure, and that was a difficult transition for me, but it did. And we had a great neighbor on one side. We had horrible neighbors everywhere else, but a great lady called Sue. And at some point, I had an office for a while, just me in the office. At some point, we needed another person, and she became our second person.
And what was her role? Running the office, I assume?
It was kind of like everything, because we were like, that made us a 2-man band. But
sure.
Her brother was into civil engineering, and he worked on the project for me on the foundation and the roads and stuff like that. And he's worked on every wind project we've built in the 24 years since that.
No way.
Does all of our civil engineering wherever we go in the country. So it's a great long-term relationship.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's nice to have those early employees still around and just know the history and the nostalgia of the whole project and the whole business.
Yeah, and I think relationships are important. When you treat people right, if you're decent and honest and open, and they are with you, then you form a great bond, and you find yourself working with people you can completely trust, and that's worth so much.
Mm-hmm.
Now, did you have a requirement when you were hiring some of these employees? I know by 2000, I believe you had like 15 employees already. But some entrepreneurs, especially in the plant-based world or the vegan world, we look for other vegan employees, right, to be part of our organization. But you don't always have, especially with something you're doing is pretty innovative. you may not have those skill sets yet available, may not be other vegans that have what you need. What was your approach in terms of hiring employees?
Just looked for good people. We were doing something brand new, as you say, so we weren't getting people really that were experienced at what we did. I didn't look for, particular kind of environment credentials, people that cared massively about the same issues. But I do think that that's never changed. But I think that we tend to attract people like that. It's never been more it's never been more true than now, actually. As Ecotricity, we've got quite a standing and a reputation, and people come to us sometimes, quite much later in life, just wanting to change their careers and do something good with it and spend time with us. And then at the other end of the spectrum, straight out of university or straight out of school even, people come to us, I would say, with varying degrees of commitment to the cause being the environment, sustainability, and then, through a process of osmosis that just grows for them. They may not be green when they get here, but they're pretty green after a while, because that's how we live. And so I think it's important we don't set that as an entry criteria. In the same way, when we run Forest Green, the football club, we don't preach to our fans about what they should be doing. We just do it ourselves. We let them see what we're doing, and we hope to have an effect that way, like a process of osmosis.
Absolutely. In those kind of the first 7-8 years, kind of getting to 2008 or so, I think you gradually went from 1 or 2 mills to for specific businesses to eventually you got in the grid. Can you tell me about some highlights in that era, and kind of, was there a year or two when there was some massive growth, or were there some years that were kind of questionable if you could survive?
Oh, sorry, which period?
Just kind of in the early 2000s.
Early 2000s.
I think it was 2003. You started with the household grids and the household.
Doing domestic electricity. Yeah, I would say early 2000s were interesting. We had the most drama, I think, in around about 98. So we went from £13,000 turnover in our first year, which was 96, 97, to 50 million in 97, 98. And we did it off the back of one massive contract with a water company that had a big demand for electricity. They made a whole bunch of it from sewage stations as well. And we formed a joint venture to sell green electricity as well. It was a really complicated joint venture. But yeah, we had this mad growth spurt to 50 million. And then it all went wrong.
No.
We were fighting a battle with them in the late 90s.
What were the key issues that turned the deal?
Turned it sour,
that turned it sour.
They had a change of heart.
Oh, okay.
Grid prices became volatile. They had a fairly novel arrangement with us, in which that we got them power at wholesale prices with a tiny markup, like 1 or 2% or something. It was a very unusual deal at the time, and they liked it when grid prices were good. Obviously, they weren't hedging. Well, I say obviously, but they weren't. And when grid prices got a little bit volatile, somebody else in the organization, probably in finance, said, "What's happening to our energy bills?"
Right.
Which was fine, but actually, they came to us and said, "Look, we're breaking this contract. We want out." And we said, "Look, that's fine. We understand, but you've got to do it according to the terms of the contract." And they said, "No, this is our demand. You give us this, that, and the other. We'll decide what we let you have. And if you don't do it, we're going to break you." This is what they said to me. I was like, wow. So we weren't having any of that, and we had a real battle with them, and we ended up winning, which was fine. Then it was the 2000s. There was a big change in the grid in the 2000s, and so suddenly we had a lot more exposure to market volatility, and we needed a big energy company to kind of sleeve that for us. And we found TXU, an American company that operated in the east of our country, and they became our new partners. We did a JV with them, and it was quite big and quite complicated, but it worked. And then one day they went bust. I don't really know that, but it was like a shock to us. And we had like a month to sort our own trading arrangements out, which was like no time at all. And then one of these amazing things happened. I don't know how we found them, but we found a bank had an energy trading department, and they were quitting the market. So they had a book of energy trades, which they wanted to unwind over the next 2 years. Otherwise, it would cost them loads of money. So in return for unwinding their trades for them, they gave us everything. They gave us the software, the hardware, the people,
Oh, wow.
the furniture. So we had a shake and bake energy trading outfit. We moved it from London to Stroud one weekend, and on the Monday morning we set up, and we'd suddenly become our own energy kind of traders. And it cost us £100. That's what we paid for it.
Wow.
And it was
So
£1
you're
million of the software alone.
$1 million.
Yes, it was madness.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you weren't always based in Stroud, were you?
Yeah, always been in Stroud.
Oh,
yeah.
you have. Okay. Yeah.
So, and it was around about then, I think, that we dived into the domestic market, which brings us to the point that you mentioned. And I think things were starting to calm down by then, I would say.
And I know you were moving on into the late 2000s, around 2008, where you had an electric supercar. Can you tell us more about that? How did you even move into that?
Yeah, I wanted a greener car, and I've been a biker all my life. And I remember writing a blog post about being a bit of a petrol head and a bit of a tree hugger at the same time, and I wanted to square those things. And so I looked around for an electric car in 2008, and you know what? You couldn't buy one. They didn't exist in the world. Not Tesla, not anybody. And so we decided to make one. And we assembled a team of motorsport engineers. They're actually based in Norfolk, where I came from. That was a coincidence. And we set them the task of building this car. It had to be a supercar, because we were looking at we were visioning a world post oil, a world of transport post oil. How are we all going to get around? And we knew that if we built a car that was like average or conformed to the stereotype of electric vehicles, like a Noddy car, Noddy's a cartoon character we have over here. I don't know, it might be a Donald Duck car over there.
Sure.
But, so if we built a car like that, we weren't going to achieve what we wanted, which was to show people that there was going to be a better way to get around. The electric had something proper. So we built a supercar. Anyway, we set the parameters. It had to be able to do at least 100 miles an hour, do at least 100 miles on one charge. 0 to 60 had to be a handful of seconds, and it had to handle like a supercar. And it took us 2 years, but we put it on the road in 2010. We called it the Nemesis. We built it kind of online. We serialized the building of it through my blog site. I think it turned into about 13 episodes. It was meant to be 6.
Oh, wow.
So we got to the end, and it was episode 13 of 6, because we were amused by the fact that it was taking too long. And it holds the land speed record in Britain still today. And it was just a fabulous car. And 2010, all the big motor manufacturers were starting to talk about electric cars. Teslas were beginning to be built in Norfolk, funnily enough, by a company called Lotus, and they were being flown to the States. This is the very early Tesla, I don't know what it was called. And we thought, we don't need to be in the car making game, because the proper car makers are going to do this. And what we learned from having an electric car was that what was really missing was infrastructure, charging infrastructure, because people weren't going to buy cars if they couldn't plug them in somewhere. And we decided that's where we needed to be next. So we kind of dropped cars from our itinerary, and we started to build this thing we called the electric highway.
And that was more along your lines, being an energy company anyway, I guess.
Yes, arguably, but by the time we got to 28, we'd expanded our mission from just energy, being the single biggest source of carbon emissions in Britain. We went and looked for the second and the third biggest, and that was transport and food. So that was in the early 2000s, and we became a company focused on energy, transport, and food. 80% of everybody's personal carbon footprint are in those 3 walks of life, and we think that's a really cut-through message for people, because we say to them, look, it's actually in your hands. You don't have to wait for governments and big companies to act. it's about how you power your home, it's about how you travel, and it's about what you eat. You can make changes in all of those things, and that's the biggest difference you can make to fight climate change. So yeah, building an electric car for us was our first foray into the world of transport. We were looking forward to an electrified future. We did some research about how much lithium there was in the world. Was there enough for every car to be electric? We found there was. We looked at how much power would have to come down the UK grid if all 30 million cars were electric. Found it was easily doable. And so we made sure that what we were doing wasn't niche, that it could be a big thing. And then we got on, we built the car, put it on the road. And as I say, we saw that electric cars were coming. And what was going to be needed next was infrastructure. So we built the highway. 2011 is when we started on that. So yeah, 9 years ago this year.
Wow. Round about that time, I think you entered your first of several kind of battles or challenges with Tesla in itself. Can you tell me a little bit about your relationship with Tesla and what were some of the challenges you guys faced kind of in the mid 2000s, 2014, I think it was the first?
Yeah, it was a few years after we'd started the highway for sure, and a few years ago now. So maybe it was 14, 15 is possible. Mm-hmm. And I think they'd made the transition from an adapted Lotus to making their own cars, or I think they had by then, or they were about to. They were going to launch in Britain. That's right. They came to us. They were going to launch the first model they made themselves in Britain, and they were looking for somewhere to put their supercharger hubs, and they were interested in our locations. And we signed NDAs and that kind of stuff. And they wanted to know everything about our relationships with our landlords and stuff like that. But we tried to protect ourselves from any kind of untoward behavior. And it dragged on for a long time, and the launch date kept getting closer, and we kept thinking, well, what are they doing? We had a set of things that we told them that we were looking for, which they kind of agreed to, but it never got crystallized. And we were kind of slightly mystified until one day, one Sunday night, one of our guys is called Simon, and he and I were negotiating with Tesla. He got an email from somebody at Tesla mistakenly, and it was meant for Simon at Tesla, and it basically talked about how they were going to kill us, and how they were talking to our government about us, going to the media, and how they were going to drop this bombshell on us. And how they'd gone to our landlords to undermine us and this kind of stuff. So that Monday, we issued a high court injunction against them. And that began a probably two-year legal battle, maybe, I'm not really sure, which we won. And, for me, now it's history.
Right. And so essentially what they wanted was they wanted to be able to have the charging stations themselves?
They wanted our network. Yeah. Right. Yeah, we saw an email from Mr. Musk saying that's our electric highway, not theirs. And
wow,
the attitude was brutal because, I had to think of the Wild West. It made me think of the Wild West. These guys came over. Right. We were the Indians in this story. We had something they wanted, and we wouldn't let them have it for trinkets. We wouldn't, and so they tried to take it from us by force. It was incredible. Completely amoral, but I've said all that before, so
yeah,
that was our experience. Not the first time in business that we bumped into very bad actors, but it was certainly a pretty brazen example.
Right.
So where's the relationship stand now in 2020?
Don't have one.
And so does Musk consider you like his nemesis? Like, is there like how bad blood? How much bad blood is there, or is there any bad blood, or are you just like we don't even talk to each other?
We don't. I'm sure we don't even think of each other. There was bad blood in the day, absolutely, but not anymore. Nah, I watch what he does in the news sometimes with amusement, and I'm sure he doesn't watch what I do.
Can you tell us a bit about kind of where the windmills are heading and where kind of your energy is coming from? I know you're diversifying in the last bunch of years into solar and green grass. We can get into that, but has there been a ban in offshore windmills for the last little while? Can you tell me a bit about that?
So yeah, it's been about 4 or 5 years. We had a Conservative government that got elected claiming they were going to be the greenest government ever. And one of the things they did was to ban onshore wind and solar.
Wow.
And slap a carbon tax on green electricity as well, actually. So they did a bunch of crazy things.
What was their purpose for banning it? Or their justification?
Yeah, I mean, they tried to say it was unpopular. But every government opinion poll ever undertaken in 20 years in our country shows that wind energy is the most popular form of energy. It's still got 70% support in our country.
Wow.
So that wasn't really what it was. It was politics. But yeah, it made no sense.
So how did you recover from that?
Well, we had to stop building onshore wind and solar. We're just starting to build solar again because we can do that. Solar wasn't banned in the planning process, but it was taken out of the financial support mechanisms. So it's a different kind of ban. But we were just about to build 2 solar projects this year without any government support because it's become economic to do that. And then the virus hit. So we've had to kind of shelve that plan just for 12 months. We'll build them next year. We've got a pipeline of solar projects and battery storage and hybridization of solar and battery and wind. We built our first hybrid solar wind project in 2010.
Wow.
And it was the UK's first solar project as well. And we've got a team of people working on a smart grid service and concept. So this is a real-time system of balancing generators and load, but being able to switch them both on and off as well. We've got generators that we can turn down or turn off. We've got load that we can turn down or turn up. And combining that with home scale battery storage as well. It's a kind of dynamic smart grid, the kind that we need to get to 100% renewable energy penetration. So we're working on that, saying some solar and some batteries and some green gas, which is, it's looking possible to do.
So are you guys out of the windmills, totally right now? When was the last one you built? And do you think you'll build any more?
Yeah, last one we built was about 2 years ago, actually.
Okay.
We'd like to build some more. We've got some ideas about how we might be able to do that. It may take a change of government, but since the ban on onshore wind, we've signed up to the Paris Accord. We've set a zero carbon target as a country. Lots of stuff's moved in the background. We're actually bringing a legal challenge at the moment to government planning regulations because they haven't updated in 10 years. That'll be in the High Court this October. And, other than that, we still make small windmills ourselves. So we have a little company called Britwind, and we make a 5 kilowatt and a 15 kilowatt windmill, mostly for export, but we do some installations in Britain. We're still here. There's still plenty to do.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned exports. As far as international acceptance of this or growth for windmills or even green technologies, period, right? Talk about solar, wind, and we'll talk more about the energy from grass as well. But what's your take in terms of the international response or embracing these green technologies? Because it's one thing for the UK, right? Because we know the UK leads in a lot of areas, we notice, in terms of plant-based lifestyles, right? And green, at least to us Americans, where we're looking going, hey, it seems like everything's being tested in the UK. It's like, what? They've got, how come we can't have that here? Why can't I have a plant-based, chicken nugget or a pizza? Why do I have to go, to the UK first? So in terms of the international expanse, so what's your take on that? Do you see it growing bigger and faster now internationally? Orders coming in maybe for the windmills?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's a particularly kind of niche kind of market amongst all things green, small windmills. But there's a big market for it. I think our most recent export was to Australia, and we've got a market in Japan. Don't think we've shipped any stateside yet. But I mean, I was in the States maybe 10 years ago, and it's funny because at that point I think it was in California, and as a vegan, it was fantastic. I could find eating out was way better than eating out in Britain. I really loved it. So it's an interesting perspective that you've got there.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I understand California. I'm in North Carolina, right? It's East Coast. I mean, I have pig farms right around us, right? This is the land that I live in.
Yeah.
But California, I expect. But
Okay.
I thought with Happy Cow and some of the people I've talked to, like Ken Spector of Happy Cow, UK is huge, right, in terms of restaurants and the growth. I think
it is now,
right? 1 in 8 people in the UK being, plant-based and growing. So I'm shocked that you would even think that, it's even better in California than the UK.
Yeah, I'm not saying I think that now. Just saying that when I went there, it was somewhere between 10 and 15 years ago. I was like, oh wow, this is like awesome. But you're right. What's happening in Britain now is amazing. I mean, vegan stuff is everywhere. It's in all the kind of places you might least expect to find it. Kentucky Fried Chicken,
Right.
Burger King, McDonald's.
Yeah.
Everybody's dabbling. But there's a lot of really good stuff happening as well. A lot of vegan organizations. There's the odd vegan football club, obviously.
Yeah, we'll get into that for sure. Before we just finish up with Ecotricity, tell us a little bit about how you see maybe the kind of two-part question. How do you see the next 10 years? Where's the energy coming from? What's Ecotricity? I know you're branching out. You've got a cell phone company, mobile phone company going now. Where do you see the Ecotricity for the next 10 years, and where do you see the energy coming from?
I think our view of things matured a while ago. In terms of electricity, we see it coming from the wind, the sun, and the sea. And we've had some R&D projects in wave power before to try and harness that third aspect. It's the most difficult one. The wind and the sun are very mature now, very economic. They're huge industries, and that will happen. And we can get to 100% green electricity in our country. We could do it in 10 years if we wanted to.
Wow.
That's happening. In terms of gas, green gas made from grass is the future. We've mapped out what's possible in our country using marginal grassland, and we can make enough gas to power all 26 million homes here just from grass. So that's how we see it. Wind, sun, and sea for electricity, grass to make gas, and we've taken care of energy from a kind of sustainability, carbon neutral kind of point of view.
Is that grass gas happening now, or is that still in the R&D stage? And how close is it to becoming, economical?
The tech is there, and so it's using a process called AD, which has been used for quite a while. Typically, it's been used to digest food waste and energy crops. We brought green gas as a concept to Britain in about 2010, and we looked for another way really to make it, because there are problems with food waste and there are problems with energy crops. Neither of them are ideal. And we came across grass as an amazing crop with a very high energy content. The land that we use to make our grass, grow our grass, will be organic. It will be a wildlife habitat. And if you look at our national plan, we'll create something like 75,000 jobs in the rural economy. Wow. Avoid the burning of about £6 billion worth of fossil fuel gas every year, which just goes up in smoke.
Right.
And turn millions and millions of hectares of land organic and into wildlife habitats, as well as create compost. The one output of our green gas mills is compost, fertilizer. So we can replace artificial fertilizers as well as part of. So it's an amazing opportunity for the country. There's a lot of work we've done there. So I was just talking today about our first gas project. And we hope to start building it maybe later this year. And we're thinking maybe we'll be turning it on sometime around this time next year.
Wow. Look forward to seeing that. That's fantastic.
Curious as far as the response from other industries, because obviously you're a rule breaker. You are a change leader, right? in not just seeing change, but really leading the change in many respects. So what's been the pushback, if you will, from industry, and how have you handled that from other industries that are, of course, obviously competing with you?
Which kind of industries? Do you mean competing in the green space?
Right, in the green space, or even just, let's say, your typical oil and gas industry that's going, well, this green technology, are they trying to stomp it out? What have you have to deal with?
Well, I guess that's changed along the way. At the beginning, I think I mentioned I went to see our local power company and said, do you want to buy some green electricity? And they laughed at the idea. So that was their initial reaction. About 5 years later, those very same people came to see us at our office in Stroud and said, oh, can we have a joint venture in this green energy thing? Which was funny, but it wasn't interesting to us. So I think the fossil fuel companies have gone from denial and humor to actually it's become a main part of their business. If you look at energy companies in Britain, you won't find one that's not involved in green energy. They all are. If you look at the big oil and gas companies, they too are involved in it to a lesser degree, particularly compared to the residual fossil business. But they're also getting into electric vehicle charging. The BPs and the Shells, are big time getting into that. So I think the conventional industries have embraced the whole green energy and electrification of transport thing. I think a lot of the food industry is embracing the plant-based eating thing. Right. And in all cases, they're doing this because they can see it coming. They can see this is what people want. And if they don't adapt their businesses to provide that, then they won't have a business. So we're in a position or a period, I would say, of transition. And that's going to accelerate. The rate of that transition is going to accelerate in the next few years. That's what I think.
I think maybe part of that's because of the grassroots movement of people recognizing sustainability more. And so where it's kind of like the plant-based diet, right? In terms of people asking for it, whether or not industry is asking for it. Tyson's has already turned around and is a beet company and said, well, yeah, we need to create our own plant-based protein because they see that's where the market's going. They have no choice, is my point, that people are asking for it, whether or not they can't dictate what consumers want now. It's too easy for consumers to get news and information from social media, from the internet, and make their own minds and push for this. And I guess it's the same with energy sustainability.
Energy, cars, and food. People want greener options in all of those, and all of those companies can see that they have to do that. And if they don't do that, then they won't have a business. I think that is completely right. I think the internet is interesting because the availability of information for all of us has never been greater. If you go back 20 years and you talk to somebody about climate change pre the internet, you were going to be lucky to find anybody that knew what you were talking about or believed you. Absolutely. Today, we all know about climate change. Some people maybe still deny it, but they're kind of in a shrinking minority. And at the same time, we've seen inside the food industry, we've seen inside factory farming, all that stuff is accessible to us in a way that it never has been before. And I think that that's caused an increase in the awareness and the concern of people, lots of people, and that is turning itself into a demand for a different way to do things. People want different energy, different cars, different food, because they can see what's happening. It used to be invisible. You can't hide anything these days, can you?
No, absolutely not. It's very, very hard. There's not many closets left to jump in. It's,
Yes.
Everybody knows everything. Privacy is non-existent pretty much these days. But yeah, absolutely. Let's shift gears a little bit and jump into the Forest Green Rovers Football Club or soccer club, as we'd like to call it over here. Tell us a little about your relationship with that and how it started. I guess in 2010, you kind of moved in and bought the club or saved the club, as I've read, and have just gone crazy with it in terms of its growth and movement with plant-based everything. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was one of those happy accidents, serendipities. It was 2010, which sounds like a big year for us because I keep mentioning 2010 was when we did stuff. And it was our local football club and it was in trouble. And they said to me, look, we just need like 30 grand to get through the summer. It's a cash flow thing. And it was a big part of its local community, 123 years old, and I thought, hell, why not? We could do this. And then it turned into something much bigger. They had far bigger problems than either they told me or they knew, or a combination. I don't know which it was.
Right. It's usually how it goes.
Yeah. And yeah, that's how it goes. And they said to me, you need to be chairman. I was like, oh God, I don't need to be chairman because I'm so busy. But it was a choice between taking responsibility for the club or seeing it fold. So I thought, oh hell, we'll why not? Let's do it. So it was a rescue mission. We didn't buy the club, but we took responsibility for it, its debts and everything like that. And then started on this path really. And it was a little bit like when I decided to build the first windmill or decided to start an energy company. I didn't think it through. I just thought we'd do it. It'd be a good thing to do. Let's do it. And everything else you can work out as you go along. That's my experience. So football was a new chapter, new industry. The club itself was in a real mess. It took 2 or 3 years of big work to kind of straighten everything out. And, kind of on day one almost, I bumped into the problem that the club was serving meat. So, that's how little I'd thought it through. I didn't think, I'll have to go in there and change everything. I just went and then went, I've got to change that now. And so we started by banning red meat in kind of like October that year, start of the new season. And the tabloids over here had a field day with that. They called it the red meat ban, and we loved that because, it was,
I bet you did.
It was notoriety, it gives us attention for the issues. We got to talk about why we'd done it and that kind of stuff. And we started a conversation with our fans about it. And we took the club vegan over a period of maybe 3 seasons, maybe 4, which is what we are now. And we did a lot of other stuff as well. The pitch went organic. We put solar panels on one of the stands, done all sorts of stuff. But we make great food. This is the key to it, I think, as a vegan football club, is getting away from that stereotype of vegan food having something missing and actually just presenting food that's fantastic. And so our fans love our food. Away fans love our food. Fans of other clubs love our food. And they come here and they tell us and they tell their clubs. And it started to percolate out into the leagues. So other clubs are now putting on vegan food because their fans are telling them that they want it, which comes back to the earlier point we were making, that when people are asking for this stuff, businesses has no option but to actually provide it. So Forest Green has been an amazing experience for us. We thought early on, this would be a really challenging audience, to bring sustainability into football, to talk to a football audience about sustainability. We won't be preaching to the choir, but that made it kind of more worthwhile for us. And we hoped that we could talk to people that were passionate about football and get them a little bit passionate about the environment. And this worked beyond our wildest dreams. We've ended up hooking up with the United Nations. We're part of the Sport for Climate Action Program. I've become a champion for that, climate champion. And we've got this global reach now as a club and as an industry. And, it's beyond our wildest dreams, really. The degree to which our work in making a football club sustainability has become a bit of a blueprint for sports around the world. It's more impact than we ever imagined we might have had back in 2010 when it all began.
I'm still confused as far as how it's taken off so big. And I hear this a lot in terms of sustainability and football. I was just telling Sean that there are several initiatives that have moved forward that the Plant-Based Network has been involved with around this whole growing movement. But it still shocks me considering 90% plus of the fans of football, again, soccer for our U.S. audience here, is male, right? Male, meat-eating males who you don't necessarily think of as concerned about the environment or recyclable plastics or sustainability in general or plant-based diets. Definitely an issue or a point of contention among people here in the debate. So what do you attribute to the success, if you will? Is it really just having really great food as being the number one driver?
I think it's probably the most important thing that the food is great, because if it wasn't, then the people that want to be skeptical, that don't want to like it, you give them a reason. But actually it's the opposite. And so, you'll find fans of our club that will say the food is better now than it ever was before. They're not missing anything. A bunch of our fans have gone veggie and vegan themselves and taken their families with them. Our fans are buying electric cars and putting solar panels on their roofs. So, our fans don't just tolerate what we're doing at Forest Green; they're proud of it.
That's incredible.
And I tell you what I think. which is what we found in football is that they're just people. They aren't actually that different to the general population. And we've gone in there, we've made the changes, we've lived the life that we believe in, and we've explained what we're doing and why we're doing it. And these people have seen the sense in that, and it's just not a big deal.
Yeah. So for people that aren't familiar with Forest Green Rovers, can you tell us the scope of? I think they play in the second tier league, but give us a scope of kind of what league they play in. Are they all professional players? I know you're trying to move up in the leagues. Just a scope, because it's obviously not the Premier League, but how many people do you get out to how many spectators do you get out? And tell us a little bit about kind of the level of the league.
Yeah, sure. So Forest Green had been in non-league for 120 odd years when we found it in 2010. About 3 seasons ago, we got promoted for the first time into the league proper. I don't know why that distinction exists, but it does. The top 4 leagues of English football are the leagues, and the rest is non-league. We're the smallest club to have ever been there. We did it through a Wembley playoff final, which was just mad and amazing.
Yeah.
And our fan base has grown. Typical gates were about 800 when we got involved, 600 to 800, probably 2010. Wow. And we're pushing 3,000 at the moment. So, kind of virtual quadrupling. Food sales have grown bigger than that. I just want to say that because at the beginning people said, you'll kill the club. People won't come here. And actually, food sales have grown faster than gates have, which is a good endorsement of the food. So, yeah, we're a full-time club. I think our turnover annually is about £5 million. We've probably got about 25 players on the books, about 5 full-time staff, coaches, football staff. We're a professional football club. We're trying to make our way into the Championship, which is 2 leagues above us and 1 league below the Premier League, which would be an incredible place to be. But, that's part of our longer-term goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And now you've got this new stadium that's just got approval, I understand, or the next step of approval after some political battles. Tell us about that. It sounds like an incredible project you're on, not just a stadium, but a green park. Is that what you call it?
Yeah, we call the whole thing Eco Park, and it is a all wooden football stadium designed to have the lowest carbon footprint of any sports stadium in the world since the Romans invented concrete, I think I should say, because concrete and steel are the kind of big problems. We won't have any, little bits of steel in the bolts and stuff like that. Designed for us by Zaha Hadid practice. It's a really beautiful stadium, and it's set in about 50 hectares or 100 acres. I'm not sure which units you guys use over there. We're a bit imperial and a bit metric.
Right, same with us.
Okay. So, and what we envisioned there is also a green technology business park. There's room there to create 4,000 jobs in the green economy. That's what we want to make happen as part of this transition that we have to make. And so it's a combination really of a football ground, green tech business park. There's going to be a little bit of housing there now by the looks of it. Reinstated canal. We're going to create a wetland area by the river. And so there'll be a big biodiversity boost as well. It's really interesting. At the moment, the land is farmland.
Okay.
And after we've done what we're going to do, our studies are predicting a 16% increase in biodiversity. And the reason I say that's interesting is because as a green person, it's normal to be attacked for doing things, but in a thoughtless kind of way. So people will say, oh, what are you trying to do? Build on a beautiful green field. You're supposed to be green. And I have to check that and say, this is actually a farm field. And that's actually bad for biodiversity, for wildlife. And if you look at our plans, we'll improve that. And more importantly, it shows that we can build, we can have sustainable development. Because we need to build houses and we need to build places for people to work, because that's just a fact of life. But it can be done in a much more sustainable way than it's been done up until now. So we'll get to demonstrate that at Eco Park as well, which for me is perfect.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, I've seen pictures of the design. We'll put those in the show notes for sure. Looks fantastic. When do you see kind of the first match happening on the field?
I think somewhere between 3 and 4 years from now. We've still got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
That's the way it is.
That'll keep you busy.
But yeah, but that's the stadium, that we think will take us to the Championship and keep us there. It's in the right location in terms of access in our county, and it'll be big enough and all that kind of stuff. So it's part of a kind of long-term sustainable plan.
Fantastic.
Dale, when you're so visionary as you have been, whether you by accident or not, right? You've been able to do a lot of things, and I don't think there's any entrepreneur, plant-based or otherwise, that would say that you're not visionary. What do you see as the future of, or what is it you would like to see? Like, what is your end goal? When do you say, I'm done, I'm good, I've done my part in this life, and I can die knowing that I made an impact? What is your end goal?
Yeah, I kind of don't have an end goal. I think, I'm a bit of a perfectionist by nature. So I think it's impossible to see a future which is perfect. So I can't have an end goal. All I can do is seek to make progress. And I really want to see more sustainable living. And it breaks down into them big three areas of life. I want to see us stop using fossil fuels and just use renewable energy, electrify transport, and stop eating animals. And any degrees of progress towards those targets, they work for me.
Yeah, we're just kind of moving towards the end of our time here, but I've got a couple of other last questions. One, politics. You seem to enjoy jumping into political discussions, and you've started recently, I guess in the last 6 months, your own podcast. What's it? Carbon Zoo. What's it called?
Zero Carbonista.
Zero Carbonista. Yeah, that's right. We'll put links to that for sure.
Okay.
Do you ever? Does it interest you to become involved in politics in terms as in running for leadership or politics down the road?
It has recently, yes.
Yeah.
I would say increasingly in the last couple of years. Yeah, fueled by a bit of frustration at the direction of travel of the previous couple of governments, the anti-green governments that we've had. And just a growing feeling as well that the people that are in charge of our country shouldn't be. They're not qualified. They're not qualified in life experience, let alone in any other way. And, they're making foolish decisions that affect us all. And it bothers me. And I feel a little bit compelled to get involved and say, well, actually, I could do a better job than that, actually. Yeah. So it's on my mind. Yes.
All right. Exciting. And I understand you've stepped back a little bit from Ecotricity now. What's kind of your day-to-day role with Ecotricity?
Yeah, I made a transition at the start of this year, appointed one of our guys to be CEO. We'd worked for about 12 months on it in a transition period. He was COO, I was CEO. And I kind of see myself long-term being the chairman. I'm the chairman now, but I mean, being responsible for the strategic direction, but for the day-to-day CEO type stuff, pass it on to somebody else. Then the virus came along and threw all kinds of spanners into the works. So I've been hands-on like crazy since then. That's a short-term thing, I think. But I would like to achieve that. We've got another election in a few years' time, probably. I can be ready for that, I think. Have the time freed up and the bandwidth and that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Fantastic.
I know you've got something that's pretty close to my heart. We work with a lot of schools. I'm with the Coalition for Healthy School Food out in New York, and done work with them for a number of projects. But are you involved as well? I believe you're involved with the project in terms of kitchen making vegan school meals. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, that began a couple of years ago. And it really began with a local guy coming to see me. He sent me an email first to say, I had this idea to make vegan school dinners, primary school dinners. It wasn't being done and this kind of stuff. And I really liked the look of his thinking. I get pitched with a lot of ideas, you might imagine. Yeah. But this guy seemed to know, he had all the ingredients. He had the knowledge, the experience. He put together a kind of coherent vision of it. And so we said, let's give it a go. And we went to set up a unit. Probably took us about 12 months to get it up and running. We're in about 300 schools at the moment. I'd say the stuff is incredibly popular. This Easter, we were going to be in 1,500 schools, but for the virus. What we found, amazingly, is that by linking Forest Green to this venture. It's called the Devil's Kitchen, and Forest Green are the Green Devils, and our catering outlets are called the Devil's Kitchen. And we just use this link to get kids excited and interested in plant-based food, and found it worked, like, not just on kids. And so the interest went from primary schools to secondary to universities, and then to theme parks. And now we're talking online retail, and it's like everywhere. And with its heritage in Forest Green Rovers, we found that's the most door opening aspect of what we're doing. But the food itself is really good, which is always important. And it's free from all 14 major food allergens: wheat, gluten, soy, nuts, you name it, it's not there. So it's inclusive. Fantastic. Which is great in a school environment. It's great in a mass catering environment, it's just fit for everybody. And that's another big appeal of it.
Wow,
that's amazing.
Yeah,
I'm looking at the numbers here, going, did I hear that right? And it's relatively new, right? I mean, this isn't like something you've had for 5 years. I mean, this is something you just put it together. You just put it together in your spare time, like just.
That's right. That's right. It's next to our little windmill factory now.
That's right.
We're doing a bunch of different things down there. We've got a carbon capture and storage project down there as well. But yeah, it's going really well. By the end of the summer, I think we'll be in online retailing in some of the big not quite fast food outlets. So there's a chain over here called Wagamama's. I don't know if you have it in the States. It's Asian food. Okay. But we make balls as well as burgers, and I mean, they like them, and we're hopeful. The further we can go with our food, the better from our perspective, because we're giving all sorts of people a different insight into how plant-based food can be.
And with that in mind, with all this impact that you're having, but you're not just making an impact in terms of sustainability and educating kids and feeding kids and just a whole gamut of different initiatives that you've been able to do and change the world, but you're making money from that, right? You're sustainable, you're taking the money, and your business, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've really taken a not-for-profit stance here to put it back in. And a lot of plant-based entrepreneurs have that almost guilt of making money or making a profit in terms of their passion in changing the world for the better, and they feel like they shouldn't. And what's your approach to that, or a philosophy?
Yeah, I understand that, because, I've got like this hippie background, and, among my peers back then, there would be the same kind of unease around the issue of money and making money. I get that. But we describe ourselves as a not-for-dividend company. So we don't pay shareholders. We pay our staff, obviously. And then all of the money that we make, we put back into what we're doing to create impact or an outcome. And for me, that's like the perfect version of capitalism. It's using the efficient tools of the business to achieve some kind of mission-led outcome, social, environmental, whichever one, or both in our case. So I've got no guilt about it. And a lot of the things we do don't make money as well. So I've got no guilt about that either. But we try to make them so. So our Devil's Kitchen is not making money now. We think it might be breaking even sometime in the autumn. But the really important thing I want to say is this. Money is not that important. And what's really important is how you approach it. Not to live your life pursuing money. And there's an old expression that I like to use. It's in the form of a question. Do you live to eat, or do you eat to live? We eat to live in terms of making money. We make money to do the things we believe in. But if you live to eat, then you only pursue money in that analogy. And that's a mistaken way to live. So I don't think money's a problem. It's how you look at it and what you do with it. That makes sense?
Yeah, that's
perfect
great.
Sense.
Put very well. Just a couple last questions that I like to ask most of our guests. Is there somebody in business that, over the years that you've admired, or right now that's running a business or has a company, or had one in the past that you've kind of looked up to, or that you're currently admiring?
Nope. Easy answer. Nope.
Yeah.
I met a lady called Anita Roddick once many years ago. She ran the Body Shop, and she was a lovely lady, and I loved what she stood for. It was a campaigning organization. So, I could give you that that example of somebody that I think has done really well, did good things.
Yeah, great. And then how about, how do you define success?
I think success is about doing good things, doing the right thing, feeling good. It never, for me, about size or money. A lot of people in business, will judge success by turnover or EBITDA, and eventually bottom line. The startups are always about the EBITDA, and the mature companies are always about the bottom line. It's not interesting. It's not about having money. I think friendships are a great measure of success. The way that other people see you. Reputation is the biggest, I think, measure of success.
All right, Ronnie, what did you think of that conversation with Dale?
Amazing, inspiring, if anything, inspiring and motivating to know that there are other people like us, right? That will go with the flow. We don't always have everything planned out. And if you listen to all of the top gurus out there, they often say, have your roadmap and have your goals and your objectives mapped out for your life and plan your legacy. And, here's how you turn your passion into a legacy and follow these steps. And some people just go with the flow, and he doesn't just go with the flow. He's made some huge
creates
impact.
It.
Right. People are following his flow. That's the beauty of it. So absolutely inspiring.
Yeah, I love it. I loved how, they say history repeats itself. And, you listen to his childhood and, so much of it makes sense. His tinkering with toys and machines and his, his reluctance to fall into place with authority. And it all just, it roams throughout his whole story. And I love it. I remember hearing a quote once. It said something about like passion. People's passion is really solidified between the ages of 13 and 15 and stays throughout their whole life. And, the people we've been talking to, it really, really shines through. I'm amazed how early and how aware he was of the climate and just the, the animal abuse that goes into eating animals at such a young age, back in the late 60s and 70s. It's incredible that he was that aware as a young man.
As a rule breaker, right? He's been true his whole life to his beliefs, his core beliefs. And we often question ourselves if we're not keeping up with our own family's beliefs or with society's beliefs. And he's definitely unapologetic for it, which is refreshing.
Absolutely.
Right? You come in and he's proud of it. He stands up, and I wish I could go back in time and be more of a rule breaker like he was.
Yeah. And, I struggle with, we could have talked to him for hours and maybe we'll get him back on again to dive even deeper. But, he's kind of skimmed over, it was 5 years to get the first windmill. And, so many of us that are in the plant-based business space, especially early on in our journey, we want to be 10 years down the road today. And, he's been at this for 20 or 30 years and it's easy to skim over the 5 years, but so many business owners are in that 5-year struggle period right now. And it's just shows that you've got to stick with it and what can come from it. Is a perfect example. I love the other kind of quote I've heard, that entrepreneurs often grossly overestimate their first 1 or 2 years and grossly underestimate their 10th year. And I know I'm guilty of that for sure. You start up a business, you hang your shingle and you expect the population just to flow in, and it doesn't happen that way. And looking at Dale, he's just stuck with it, and within a couple of years he went from 13,000 pounds to 50 million pounds. But if didn't get through that first 5 years building the first windmill, he never would have gotten there.
Definitely had some challenges right along the way, as he mentioned, and a couple years there with a lot of drama, right, that he faced. But as you just pointed out, he did this big ways where he wasn't doing that well, and the next thing you know, he's got 50 million contract with but as you mentioned, a large client, right?
Mm-hmm.
That changed things, and then he was able to turn that in, and other things came along the way, kind of build, and assume something's going to help you along the way to change things. And I just love that
Mhm.
attitude where you don't necessarily have to. I mean, as we know, paralysis analysis, right? People wait
Yeah.
until everything lined up
Right.
perfect.
Exactly. Yeah. He never had anything lined up.
No, but he says he's a perfectionist. But at the same time, I'm going, I don't know. He's, like I said, very extremely motivating and inspiring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just like, you know, his definition of success of, you know, the people around him and the impact he's made. Like, just think of the enormous impact that his companies and his organizations and his philanthropy that has made on the climate and the people of Great Britain. It's just incredible. If, you know, none of this was created, it would have been a disaster. And it's amazing that just the impact that he's had in his lifetime, and he's, you know, not slowing down anytime soon by the sounds of it.
No, he's not putting a hard stop to anything. He's pretty much saying he's going with the flow. He's just gonna keep changing the world, you know, in one project at a time, and whatever comes his way, he wants to solve. Like when he talked about vegan meals, right, for schools.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't do. I call those tsunami starters, right, where they create these huge waves,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't follow someone else's wave. They do it. And he doesn't think small. I mean, he has a small club. The next thing you know, that small club is
going to be the
winner, right? The champion. So amazing.
Yeah.
It's really amazing.
Yeah. Great. Well, folks, thanks for joining us today. This is Ron and Sean signing off, and I hope you have a wonderful week.
Take care.